Hey, so rhythm games can be one of the most intimidating genres of video game to get into. They have arguably some of the highest skill ceilings mechanically of all the different genres, and way too much variety. Today I'm going to try and cover every common rhythm game term I can think of. Because there are so many terms, I'll try to make my explanations brief and easy to understand without coming across as a pretentious elitist. Just one thing to note, by a common term, I'm referring to terms that can be used across most rhythm games. So I won't be covering game-specific terms like slams, no bar, or break strumming. Without further delay, let's begin. So first off, let's start from the beginning with chart. A chart is essentially a rhythm game level. They can come in all different difficulties and types, but they're all charts. Unless you play Osu or Beat Saber, and then they're called maps, but they must never be called the same thing. Never! If you play Stepmania or Eterna, you'd call these files instead. There are 3 different terms generally, but the general catch-all term for any rhythm game level would be a chart, which we'll be using throughout the video. These terms come from the actual file format of the game they come from, by the way. For example, map is a shortening of beatmap from Osu, and files are a shortening of simfile from Stepmania. Chart, which we'll be using throughout the video, comes from stepchart. It's important to distinguish that the chart is not the same as the song. The song is the actual audio, while the chart is the notes themselves. Songs do carry a ton of data though, like the BPM. BPM stands for beats per minute. It's basically a measurement of how fast or slow the song is. What's considered fast or slow is different for everyone, and you get a feel for what range is considered fast or slow for you as you play. Within the chart itself, there are notes. There are a bunch of different types per rhythm game, but there are a few universal types. First, single notes. Not much to say here, it's a note. Then you have long notes, aka LNs, aka hold notes. As the name implies, you hold down the note. Important to note, LN can also be used to describe a chart mostly focused on long notes. Different rhythm games call their notes different things, of course. Do keep this in mind. One more thing, certain rhythm games will include release timing with their hold notes. This means that the timing you release a long note with is also scored. For example, Sound Voltex doesn't have release timing. You can hold down the note and keep holding it without penalty. In DJ Max though, there is release timing. You'll be penalized for releasing a hold note too late or too early. Now, let's start a chart. You're about to encounter a ton of patterns. Patterns are basically common arrangements of notes that appear repeatedly throughout charts. Textbook example of this would be Red Red Blue in Taiko no Tatsujin. It's a pretty common pattern throughout the game. Their consistent appearance helps ingrain them into our muscle memory so that when we see the familiar Red Red Blue, we just know what to do by ink sync. Here are a few common ones you'll find globally. Chords are patterns with more than one note being pressed at a time, and there are also terms to describe these chords. Jumps or doubles are meant for 2-note chords, triples or hands are meant for 3-note chords, and quads are meant for 4-note chords. Just a little fun fact, if you're wondering why doubles are called jumps, it's because in DDR, you have to physically jump to hit both notes at the same time. Triples are called hands too because you have to use your hand because you only have 2 legs. This terminology carried over into rhythm games where you didn't have to jump or do push-ups though, and we still use them today. Now then, I'm going to hand the next section off to Loser Man Wins as we cover some pretty specific patterns and terms that he's a lot more well-versed in than I am.
Hi, my name is Jack, and my best skill set is jacks. Yes, really. Jacks are a pattern where multiple notes come in sequence for the same button. Like a jackhammer, your hand's going to be moving up and down rapidly. Mini jacks generally refer to jacks that are only 2 notes long. Trills are patterns that alternate between 2 lanes on the playfield. Trill is also a term used in music. In piano, it refers to when a pianist alternates between one note and the note above it really quickly. This is a trill, this is a trill, and this is a trill. It's pretty important to note that while the term jack implies that you're supposed to, well, spam that button like a jackhammer, there are certain cases where you can alternate which hand hits the button that the jack falls on. When the jack pattern itself is egregiously long, we can call that a long jack or an extended jack. For example, B from Sound Voltex is a particularly infamous case. Or Hera from My My. Grace notes, also known as flams, are when two or more notes in different columns are played in really close succession. In actual gameplay, they're more similar to chords. Rolls are a type of pattern where notes go across every lane sequentially, and staircases, pretty similar, are rolls that go back and forth across the lanes like this. Now, the past few terms we've been covering are VSRG specific. VSRG stands for vertically scrolling rhythm game. It's any rhythm game where notes scroll vertically toward a hit indicator. Games like DDR, Vivid Stasis, or Beatmania 2DX are vertically scrolling rhythm games, though games with a perspective playfield like Archaea or Sound Voltex are often lumped into the VSRG category as well. These are the most common subgenre of rhythm game, and there are way too many different VSRG patterns, so I won't list them all, but the ones I've listed are applicable to many other rhythm games. If you want more info on VSRG patterns specifically, one good resource is the Osumania pattern repository. And now, back to Zetchi.
Streams are a long sequence of quick notes, each normally a 16th note apart. These can last for pretty long, and when they do, we call them deaf streams. When a stream becomes a deaf stream is pretty subjective, honestly. Don't worry about it too much, it's just semantics. You might not be aware of what 16th note meant earlier. We're gonna need to delve a little bit into music theory. Let's talk about beat divisions. As far as rhythm games go, they're basically a way to communicate to others how close or far notes are to each other. So in common meter music, aka 4/4, there are 4 beats in a bar. You can divide this bar into divisions. These divisions are what we normally refer to. For example, quarter notes play 4 times in a bar. The distance between them would be a fourth apart. 16th notes play 16 times in a bar, and the distance between them would be 16th apart. These divisions can really go as high as you want, really. Closely related to that are time signatures. They indicate how many beats are in a single bar. The top number shows how many beats there are in a single bar, and the bottom number represents the type of beat. For example, in 4/4, the most common time signature, there are 4 quarter notes per bar. There are other more complex time signatures, of course. In 3/4, a time signature often associated with waltz, there are 3 quarter notes per bar. Here's an example of an uncommon time signature, 7/8. This means that there are 7/8 notes per bar. It's pretty uncommon to find time signatures like this, but it's good info to keep in the pocket regardless. Last term you'll need to know for the music theory section, polyrhythms. It's basically a pattern where 2 or more different rhythms of different speeds are played at the same time. In rhythm game terms, it's a goddamn doozy. Anyways, that's enough for the music theory section, let's move on. Now, what do you do with patterns? You read them. Reading just means you're interpreting the pattern and playing it properly, really. You see the pattern and you know what to do, you're reading it. When you're playing a chart for the first time and you've never seen it before, that's a sight read. Here's a way less used term that I think should be used more, play read. It's similar to sight reading where you play a chart for the first time, but the difference is that for play reading, you've seen the chart before, probably by seeing a recording of it beforehand. Once again, this is all just smelly semantics and nitpicking. Don't worry about it too much. Of course, not all charts are equal. They can be overcharted. When a chart is overcharted, it means that there are notes linked to sounds that just don't exist. The example I'm showing here is rather exaggerated and kind of extreme, but it serves to show what overcharting is pretty well. Some people really enjoy this style of charting though and take it to creative extremes. We call this style of chart a dump chart. There are multiple definitions of this, but this is one that I think applies globally. They're basically overcharts with an emphasis on creative freedom and interesting, challenging gameplay. A common example of this would be all those 9-star jump maps you see on Osu. No sane mapper would map the song like this, but people still play it because it's fun and difficult. A term you might see thrown around in relation to overcharts is manip, which is short for pattern manipulation. Japanese players call this anmitsu, and some Western players might simply refer to this as cheesing. It's basically a way of simplifying patterns you wouldn't have the speed to hit otherwise. For example, this pattern here. It's just extremely fast 1, 2, 3, 4 rolls, with the numbers referring to which lane they fall on. If you don't have the speed to hit that pattern correctly, you could instead hit the pattern as jump drills. It should be noted that dump charts and overcharting aren't necessarily good or bad. They have their place in rhythm games and they serve to challenge players as well as raise the skill ceiling long term. They generally shouldn't be commonplace though. When you can't read a chart, sometimes you'll have to resort to the devious hidden arts known as mashing. It really just means you're mashing buttons without any thought or care for the rhythm, whether it's because you're playing a chart far above your comfort zone or you're squeezing out stamina. It's bad practice, just don't do it. It'll impact your accuracy in the long run. Accuracy refers to one of two things: how good your timing was on a play, often represented by a percentage in many games, or the skill set of being good at timing. You will probably run into a scenario where the chart just gets way more difficult out of nowhere. That, my friend, is a difficulty spike, aka a diff spike. These can be used sometimes to emphasize the chorus or the strongest part of the music, and sometimes they're there just to screw with you. We interrupt this information overload to bring you a message from our sponsors. This video is sponsored by paper. Write on it, draw on it, fold it, crease it. You can even eat it. Versatile and always here for you to write on. And that's paper. One thing many rhythm games have is the option to change your note speed, aka your scroll speed. It's a setting the player can change that just impacts how fast the notes appear in scroll. This option is purely up to preference. Some people prefer faster note speeds than others, and some people like playing at super low note speeds. Some rhythm games don't allow as much versatility with this option, like Osu with its set approach rates per map, or Taiko where the scroll speed is set by the charter. It's important to note that scroll speed is a purely visual option. The song isn't slowing down or speeding up. It's simply a visual change and is up to preference. Scroll speed does affect how you read a chart and oftentimes can impact your accuracy. Everybody has their own comfort zone when it comes to this. Speaking of accuracy, let's talk about judgments. This is basically how the game judges your accuracy. In DDR, for example, there are 5 of them: marvelous, perfect, great, good, and a miss. Closely related to that are judgment windows, aka judge windows. These are terms used to describe the timing window of each judgment, often expressed in milliseconds. In DDR, for example, marvelous has a judgment window of 17 milliseconds, meaning you have to hit the note within that window to get a marvelous. Different rhythm games have different judgment windows, of course, some stricter than others. With these comes hit error. It refers to how early or late you hit a note, and many rhythm games will show you whether you hit early or late on a note, so you can either adjust your gameplay accordingly to hit earlier or later, or adjust your offset. Different games show this differently. For example, in Vivid Stasis, you're shown early or late per note, and in Taiko, you get nothing, no hit errors at all. Now then, you've practiced and practiced, and you've gotten your first FC, or full combo. As the name implies, it means hitting every note in a chart. Take it up a notch and hit everything with a perfect judgment and you get an AP, or all perfect. Different rhythm games can call these different things, of course. In Taiko, we refer to APs as Donderful Combo, or DFC. Your combo is how many notes in a row you've hit without missing, and max combo, often recorded at the end of by most games, is the highest combo you've reached throughout the chart. Oh no, you broke your combo near the end of the chart? That's the rhythm game version of a choke. It happens to all of us and it hurts every time. Inversely, if you miss at the start instead, then go on to full combo the rest of the chart, it's called a reverse choke. These hurt each and every time they happen, but we learn to live with it, I guess. And now for a term I absolutely dread, tech. This one's hard to define because everybody uses it differently and I really hate it. I think a brief definition that fits pretty well is charts that contain patterns or rhythms that are unorthodox or unique, hard to read, and are not commonly seen in standard charts. You can see why it's hard to define. Charting metas, especially in non-VSRG rhythm games, shift all the time. What's unorthodox just a few years back might become commonplace today as charting metas shift. From a casual standpoint, one could say that technical charts are generally more free-flow, with the charter generally given more creative liberty. Once again though, this is all just semantics. Nobody's going to beat you up for misusing the term tech, and if they do, they're being silly. So, Softflan is a term generally used to describe charts with lots, and I mean lots, of scroll speed changes. These can come in the form of the notes abruptly stopping, or the scroll speed of the song speeding up or slowing down rapidly. My favorite example I can think of off the top of my head would be Pluto from DDR. There are countless stops throughout the chart, and are for the most part untelegraphed. Basically, you can't tell when they're coming and need to rely mostly on memory. Important to note, Softflan charts don't necessarily need to have BPM changes. BPM changes refer to the song's musical speed changing mid-song. Softflan refers to the chart's scroll speed changing mid-song. We've been going through a lot of info, so here's a fun fact that's not necessarily important, but I think it's pretty funny. The term Softflan actually originates from a 2DX second style chart called Soft Landing on the Body. Softflan. At the end of the chart, the BPM quickly switches from 159 to 318 and then to 79, all in the span of 4 seconds. Just try sight reading that. Even funnier is the fact that 318 BPM was actually completely unintentional. If you want a more in-depth explanation on what Softflan exactly is, I'd highly recommend checking out Loserman Win's video all about Softflan. Now, excuse me while I eat this oh so delicious Softflan. Now, let's talk about rating. Rating is basically a decent measurement of the player's skill level present in some rhythm games. If you're familiar with the ELO system, it's basically the rhythm game equivalent. The higher the rating, the better the player generally. How rating is measured is different for each game, but for the most part, you clear a bunch of really tough songs with really good scores and your rating goes up. That makes it a kinda questionable way to measure skill though. A player could be great but just not play that many different charts, and their rating would probably remain stagnant. For that, we have somewhat of a solution in the form of Dawn courses. Ever wanted to know where you stand in skill for a particular rhythm game? If your rhythm game of choice has Dawn courses, that's a good way to find out. Dawn courses are basically tests of skill. The most common format is a player being given 3 to 4 songs in a row with a set clear condition. For example, in Taiko no Tatsujin, we have Dawn Dojo. The format of a single course here would be for the player to clear 3 select songs of around the same difficulty. If the player gets too many okay judgments or misses, they're out. In Osumania's Dawn courses, the clear condition is to clear all 4 songs, ending with at least 96% accuracy. Somewhat related to that are boss songs. These are charts known mainly for their difficulty, and because they were designed to be challenges. Now, most, if not all, rhythm games have a difficulty rating system attached to them. For example, in Taiko, we have star ratings from 1 to 10. More stars, more difficult. But some 10 stars are simply more 10 stars than others. These are charts and songs that, more often than not, are at the peak of difficulty in their respective rhythm games. Bonus points if they have a cool little reveal cutscene when you unlock them. Some common examples I consider boss songs are Through the Fire and Flames from Guitar Hero 3, or Freedom Dive from pretty much every rhythm game at this point. What's considered a boss song can be pretty subjective, but in relation to Dawn courses, you could call the final song at the end of a Dawn course to be a boss song, because, well, it literally is the final boss of that Dawn course. I just put on a jacket. Jacket, or song jacket, just refers to the cover art accompanying the song. It's a simple term, there was no need for a stupid pun at the beginning. Gimmick is a pretty subjective term used to describe charts. There are a few definitions of it, but to me, it refers to when a chart has a specific theme or idea it follows that separates it from conventional charts. One of the clearest examples of this would be Tsubaki, an Osu map by Hollowwings. The gimmick for this map is that every slider is purely horizontal, with most of the music being represented by the hard-to-follow, rapidly changing slider speed. Closely related to that are mod charts. Mod charts are charts that use special visual effects, and for the most part, go ham with those special effects. Not ITG is a rhythm game that's all about mod charts. Arrows go left, right, center, upside down. Yeah, they're not exclusive to Not ITG though. Other rhythm games have been implementing their own versions of mod charts too. Here's a term that's not related in the slightest but sounds similar. Mods. Not mod charts, mods. This is short for gameplay modifier and generally refers to settings the player can use to change up their gameplay. A common example you might be familiar with is the hidden mod from Osu, which removes approach circles and causes hit objects to fade out. Rhythm games have all types of different mods you can use to challenge yourself, whether it's Taiko with its chart randomizer, which randomizes the color of the notes, or DJ Max's whatever the hell this is. Now for a term everybody knows, brain power. Just joking, we're talking about earth power. Earth power is a term originating from the 2DX community. Originally written as Jiriki and loosely translated to English, Earth power is a term used to generally encapsulate a player's general skill ability. IIDX.org describes it as your base ability to hit and read notes. If you're coming across songs where you're generally failing due to not being able to keep up with the chart as a whole, that might be a situation where you'd say you're lacking in earth power. Now, this is a very niche term. In the general Western rhythm game space, it is more likely for you to win the lottery twice than find somebody using this term, except in certain circles. It's a term mostly used by the Japanese that's only recently getting adopted by the West. However, it's still cool to know regardless. A hard clear simply refers to clearing a chart on a harder than normal health gauge if the game offers it. Using Sound Voltex as an example, you start on normal gauge, but then have the option to select the hard gauge instead, with stricter requirements to clear and the possibility of failing out mid-song. Clearing with this gauge rewards a hard clear and gives the player a different lamp on the song select screen. When I say lamp there, I'm not referring to the IKEA one. A lamp is simply the indicator used in some rhythm games to show the highest clear type the user has achieved. The simplest example of lamp I can think of would be in Taiko no Tatsujin in the form of crowns. A regular clear on a chart in Taiko would be a simple silver crown. A missless or full combo of the chart would be a golden crown, and a PFC or an all perfect would be a rainbow crown. Wow, that was a lot of information, wasn't it? That was every essential rhythm game term we could come up with. Of course, rhythm games aren't that small. There are probably way more terms. If I missed any you think I should have added, let me know in the comments. Huge thanks to Jack, aka Illusionman Wins, for his help with the video. Thank you to Space Error for helping me draw basically every single chibi you see in this video. And thanks to Cheryl and Ladio's Life for helping me proofread the script for this. Do check their channels out and also go play Vivid Stasis because it's underrated. I'm not chilling. I love lesbian. Thank you guys for watching. Go watch my stream on twitch.tv/ZGK.